Members, Kissy is winding up the fire Zoom thing. How are we going, Kissy? 1 minute. Right. Okay. Well, members, we are live on the on Zoom now. So. Welcome to you all, and to those looking from afar, welcome to this meeting of the Landlord Services Advisory Board. My name is Paul Rivers, and I have the pleasure of chairing this with Terry on my left, who will keep me, no doubt, in order. So, to hit the agenda on this finish day, apologies for absence. Kizzy, do we have any?
Yes, we have apologies from Chris Austin and we have apologies from Councillor Wicks.
Thank you. Thank you. And declarations. Do we have any declarations of interest?
I haven't received any, but Councillor Keith.
Thank
you. Thank you, Chairman. If we're discussing garages, our garages, then we both have a garage. And please, could I apologise that I have to leave early because I have a meeting to attend back in Hazelmere. Thank you.
I don't have to leave, but I have an interest. We rent a garage from Waverley Borough Council, and I know it's in the papers here, so I should just say there's a non-pecuniary.
Oh, thanks, John. Thanks, Jackie. Excellent. So we'll try and finish before you have to rush off. That's always a good plan. Excellent. So if we just pick up on notes of the previous meeting, members, are you happy to accept the notes of the previous meeting? Welcome, Danielle. And you have your baby with you. I'll be quiet. Lovely to have you back. Thank you. Danielle, can you use your microphone?
Hi, I did send apologies for last meeting, but probably not in the right way because Jeanette and Terry knew I wasn't going to come, but I don't think I officially sent them. So, oh, sorry. So I'll be off anyway. So I don't know if that needs to be added to the apologies or if I just look like a naughty girl for not.
Kissy will keep us in charge. So, anything arising from the notes from last week that anybody wants to pick up on? I'll just mention one thing here. I mean, I'm sure we are all pretty much aware of the issue that's in the press at the moment. You know, the death of little Awab Ishak from there's a 2-year-old who died from black mold in a flat in Rochdale, in a 1-bedroom flat in Rochdale. Our officers have published quite a lot of information on how to handle this sort of thing for our tenants, in particular in the last Homes and People magazine, which is pretty good. Of course, the challenge that we all have is that the way to limit the extent of mold is to keep your house at 18 degrees, which is the sort of thing that people get very worried about at the time of expensive fuel. So we have this balance, and from a tenant's point of view, I would hope that if any of you hear of any people getting worried about this, that you do put it through to in the normal channels, and we can perhaps address. Councillor Rubini.
Did you want to discuss this now or later on? Because I would like to ask the officers a question about mould in particular in a series of flats down in Hazelmere and St Christopher's, which have been known to be mouldy for many, many years. And I'm hoping that by now it's all been cured. We had to move a tenant out about 15, 16 years ago because of the state, we couldn't cure the moulding.
Okay, thanks, John. Officers, any immediate content? I'm sure we'll pick this up after the meeting if we can, but be very happy, Andrew, if you could say a word?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. And we have our Property Services Manager on the call today, Heather Rigg. Yes, we'll certainly pick that up, Councillor Rubini. One thing I was going to say in my kind of roundup as Head of Service, in fact, the only thing I was specifically going to say was about mould, and to make some reference that the Chairman's already made, which is good. And in the strategic asset management strategy that we're rolling out, it's been already identified that we need to have a multifaceted approach to addressing mould in our properties. There is a lot of social media traffic at the moment, and as Councillor Rivers says, we have put some information out to our tenants about how they can reduce the incidence of mould. But also, if any of our tenants are worried about mould, they must please contact us, because it's really important that we can get out, have a look, see what the problem is. It might be a squirt of anti-mould and a J-cloth, but of course it might be a leaking pipe behind the wall. So I think really, if any of our tenants have a concern, they should contact us. And we are taking a full-blown strategic approach to mould, and of course that will come through the stock condition survey. I'll ask Heather Rigg if she wishes to comment further, but I know it's very much on her agenda. If I may, Chair, that is.
Please do. Heather?
Chair.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, this is something that's been on the agenda, and as Andrew said, it is one of the actions within the asset management strategy that I will be going through later. But just to give assurance, it isn't a one size fits all. We've been actually alive to this, started working on it back in May. I've got an officer dedicated dealing with this, but it comes off the back of the Housing Ombudsman report that came out, and we're using that as our sort of our guidance, because it's not lifestyle, and there is this assumption that, oh, it's all down to lifestyle. No, and actually we've banned the use of using the word lifestyle, because it's not. It's multifaceted, it's no one size fits all, and we do have a process that we are reviewing and we are updating. At the moment we are doing a bit of a data gathering, looking through our stock data to understand the worst performing, so that we can do a sort of belts and bases review. We've also got to do our reports back to the regulator for social housing that came in through this week through the Secretary of State, and we will be reporting. But it's something that we're really cognizant of, and we want to do it in a holistic way, multifaceted, ranging from training of officers and in a phased way through to our approach in terms of condensation, damp, mold, and it's not going to be just a matter of cleaning it down. It could be an insulation issue that we are addressing through our energy strategy, energy efficiency works. It may be, as Andrew said, something like a leaking pipe that we can address immediately. So it's something that I will want to pick up with Terry and the tenants panel in the new year to get their overview of the new process about where we need to be focused. But it's sad that it had to get to this stage that is brought it to the fore. But it's a project that we have wholeheartedly engaged in, and will be bringing where we are with it. I think it's on the forward programme for February, and I really look forward to the conversation that comes from that.
Heather, thank you for that. Jackie, and then Danielle.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Just a thing about the flats in St Christopher's Road. This is no new thing. I have been on the town council many years, as Stephen remembers, that we've had problems with St Christopher's flats and mould probably since about the early 90s, and it's very difficult to resolve down there. I mean, it's been looked at by the private tenants at some stage, so there is something more than damp possibly in those flats that's causing the problem. And I would say it's not Waverley's fault. It's possibly, I feel, something to do with the actual building, because it's been going on for so long, and it does include several flats down there.
Thanks, Jackie. And we'll pick this up after this meeting.
Yes, we
Danielle?
will, Chairman, yes.
Danielle?
Hi, when they do the stock review, will it be someone who's quite technical who's looking? Because, for example, I had quite a mouldy, one of those big walk-in cupboards that you get, and it was quite damp and mouldy in there. And Mia's fitted a tiny little vent to do the airflow. And when someone from Waverley explained to me the science about the hot and the cold air meeting and such like, in the end, I actually replaced the whole door for a louvre, do you call them, a slatted door, which actually cured the problem. So maybe some more, less extreme than what's been mentioned here cases could be if the tenant is educated about the reasons for condensation in some areas, and if simple things like a different type of door could be used, is that sort of going to be looked at?
Absolutely, Danielle, and you've literally hit the nail on the head. When I talk about training, that's tiered and targeted training, we want to involve tenants in that too, because it's a learning curve that we're all going on. In terms of the stock surveys, yes, anybody who will come out will be I would expect them to be a RICS qualified surveyor. They will be focusing on the HHSRS, which is sort of a building criteria. There are 29 categories. One of those categories is damp and mold, and it's categorized going from category 1 to, which is severe, through to a category 5, which is all's good. And that will be a detail that we will be picking up within the stock survey as well. But absolutely tenant education, and I know we've sort of started low key in terms of the leaflet that went out with the last month's Homes and People, but that needs to be continuous. And training housing officers, training our inspectors as well, to give those advice, and not just to go, oh, it's not being vented. People need to know the reason and be able to put the whole picture together and tell that story. So absolutely, that's kind of the way that we've been thinking. And again, it'll be in the new year now, just given everything's going on, but we will be really great to get your ideas and feed that into the project that we're working on.
Thanks, Heather. Danielle, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I just wondered as well, will we be also coming back to voids and carpets at a later point?
Sorry, Danielle, I missed that. Could you say that again?
Too northern for you. Will we be coming back to voids and carpets later on?
It's not on our agenda, but Annalisa?
If you'd like me to, I would just make a quick comment. Yes, we're just starting next month an internal relet review, and voids and carpets, as mentioned, will be included in that. And again, it's something that's come through the Housing Ombudsman about making sure you consider whether it's appropriate to leave carpets in properties. So to assure you, we do, if there's a good quality carpet, we do it on a case-by-case basis. And one of the other reasons for considering keeping carpets in voids is for noise transference as well. And also we're doing a comprehensive relet review starting in December, and we'll be coming back to this group to discuss the issues and suggestions that we find, and we'll come forward to discuss them with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Annalisa. John?
Yes, thanks for letting me come back, Chair. I just want to widen this out a little bit, if you just bear with me. I promise I won't be long. As a councillor, obviously, I'm not just responsible, if that's the right word, but looking at our own tenants, but the wider community. So can anybody explain to me what we're doing about social landlords in this? Because obviously it may not be us who have mouldy houses, it could be social landlords. Is there a link here that we're working on, or I don't know what our responsibility is, to be honest.
Thanks, John. Andrew?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Rubini. Yes, I mean, we don't have any direct control at all over social landlords, but they will have had the same letter from DLUC, and they'll have the same letter from the housing regulator, so they will have to get their houses in order. We have noticed that 2 of the major providers in our borough, Clarion and I think Southern Housing Group, have had mould flagged. So our housing enabling team are in touch with them and ask them to give an account of themselves of what they're doing. Now, we have no governance over them, but we can find out what they're doing. I think a much greater concern, and this is for the private sector housing team, are private sector landlords. largely unregulated, and certainly in my experience, our private sector housing team had a lot of issues with mould. In fact, I remember one particular case where the mould was so rare, it had to be sent to America to be analysed, and causing considerable health problems. So in the private sector, again, that has come out, the letter has come out to councils to engage with private landlords in their boroughs and their districts to pursue this whole issue of mould, and our private sector housing team will be working on that. Again, there's only so much we can do. Our teeth are fairly short and reasonably blunt, but I think what has happened with this little boy is going to sharpen the teeth across the piece, and I think the government are very much on it.
Thanks, Andrew. Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to make two comments. The first one is that a lot of old properties that have had cavity insulation put in has caused the cavities to be blocked, and that's a big cause of damp. And also another reason is gutterings overflowing and downpipes overflowing. There's actually no policy in Waverley of cleaning gutterings out, is there? So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I think Mrs. Rivers had a word with me about that only yesterday, but I'm not going to go up a ladder. I'll find someone who will. Andrew, is there anything we can talk about that? Or Heather, perhaps?
Absolutely, and Robert's right. There isn't a cyclical programme for guttering clearance, and it's something that I will take up with Hugh Wagstaff once he takes over his role as the strategic asset manager, because I think that's a fair point. We need to look at it more preventative manner rather than reactive, and currently that's how we do it. If someone rings in, then we will go out and clear them, but it's on a case-by-case basis. So I'll take that away and discuss that with you. In terms of cavity insulation, absolutely, that's something that we've picked up on, and it's one of the programs we've got rolling that we will be looking at redoing or cavities where they can do, and where it's failed or failing, getting to that age as stock components do, that along with their insulation, and that feeds into the Fabric First policy of how we want to approach our energy efficiency and insulating our homes too. So there's crossover between a number of different corporate priorities there. So that is a program. There is this program, a small program, and that will be increasing over sort of the remainder of this year, going into next year and beyond.
Heather, thank you very much for that. Well, thank you all. Thank you for your contributions on that. To work then, Annalisa, you have Q2 performance report to take us through. Thank you very much for that.
Good morning, everybody. So you might need to cast your mind back and think about that lovely summer we had, because this, the Q2 performance report is based on our performance during July, August and September. So it's a bit hard to remember those beautiful months we had. If my computer's about to die, I just really wanted to pull out a few things from the commentary. So I'm pleased to say that the works at Vernon Court are practically completed. Would you like to see a picture of a wall? Those of you who've been to this meeting before and watched me know that sometimes it goes a little bit odd while I just try and sort out what we're doing. Bear with me. Well, I share the screen.
I suppose if the computer doesn't work, we could call it the Wall Street crash, couldn't we?
Thank you. Yes, yes, that was, yes. That,
Pretty
that
awful,
took a bit
Chairman, I know.
longer. That took longer to repair than this one, but only just.
Okay, I will circulate the photos to you because all great plans have maybe failed me. Bear with me. Oh, we're getting closer, we're getting closer. Right. Here we go. So you may recall we had an incident where there was a lot of rain and a wall came down, and it took a little while to resolve. But I'm pleased to say that's. Can you see that picture there? So this is the new boundary wall. Give people safe access around the site, and you can see how in keeping it is with the area. So these lovely stone walls have been developed. So it's really nice to actually see that completed after I think nearly a year of work for that. And I'll just stop sharing the screen. Thank you. Lovely. So that was one update from the commentary. As Heather's already mentioned, Hugh Wagstaff will be the strategic asset manager. He'll be starting in January. We've continued to work on the stock condition tender, and at the risk of stealing Heather's thunder, the tender will be out next month. I'm sure she'll give you a bit more of an update on that when she talks about the housing asset management strategy. And the final paragraph in the commentary was reflecting on the work that had been completed with tenants at Lucas Fields, and that's been a really positive piece of work that we've done with tenants, with councillors. We've made some improvements to the lighting and pathways in their area, and it's really made a difference to the whole community there. And that's something we really want to continue and roll out with other residents as well, and set up residents associations so we can all work together to focus, prioritise and make improvements. I also spoke to Chris Shepway yesterday to get an update from him, our Ian Williams team who deliver our responsive repairs and voids contract, because you'll see on the KPIs that the key performance information that unfortunately we're not yet meeting target. You'll remember that the contract went live on the 1st of April. We've been working really hard to get the contract mobilised. We're now in that implementation, and there's a gentle improvement, and we're heading in the right direction. And the good news this month is that they're now fully staffed. They've got a full suite of operatives, and they've just recruited their resident liaison officer as well, who will be coming along to our warm winter welcome. So you'll be able to meet her there as well. But what Chris did say is we're heading into winter, and there has been a big increase in the number of responsive repairs jobs that are coming through. We always expect an increase in the winter, but we put things in place, but please be mindful that there is a lot of demand on the surface at the service at the moment. And I'm happy to take any questions from anything else from the performance report.
Thanks, Annalisa. Any questions? John?
Yeah, I think I'm on the right place. Page 19. When I opened it and looked, all I could see was a lot of red marks for not getting there. I have read the report, obviously. Is the situation improving? When I look at that, obviously, what I would like to do when we come next time, instead of seeing a lot of red squares, I'd far prefer to see a lot of orange and perhaps even green to show that we're keeping up with things. But I did look at that and I thought, ouch.
Thanks, John. So we can congratulate our tenants on HO1 then as being a green bit at the top, but and also HO5B. But any comments on these on the?
Yes, as I mentioned, so the majority of those red ones are around the responsive repair. Well, it is the responsive repairs and voids contract, and as I mentioned, that started on the 1st of April. It's now fully mobilised, and we're continuing to improve. You may remember that we are now collecting data from tenants after they've had a repair done, so the tenant satisfaction information, and that's been really useful to help the team to identify where we can improve the service. Is it around the communications and really following up on things? So as I said, yes, we are gently moving in the right direction, and I'm hoping that we will be becoming more of an amber colour and hopefully green at some point next year.
Thanks, Annalisa. The secret is to print it out in black and white, I think. Jackie.
Yes, can I discuss, Annalisa, what is the sort of turnaround time of voids now? Because at one stage it was a bit protracted in some areas.
Yeah, so the last quarter, I put my specs on, it was 26. So we are still, our target is still 20. And one of the reasons we're doing the relet review is we know that we haven't hit that 20 for the last 2 years. We know we've had unusual circumstances over the last 2 years with lockdown and with the change in contractor as well. So we really want to focus on and are we focusing on the right thing? You know, sometimes focusing on how long it takes us to turn around. We need to balance the rent loss versus the void costs. And one of the theories we have is we're spending more on cleaning and decorating and clearing properties because people are having to move out quickly. So we want to do some analysis and do some things. So we are getting better at the void turnaround time. But as you're aware, we're doing a project over the next 3-4 months, which we will engage with you. And we're really looking at focusing on making sure we've got a cohesive and a comprehensive relet service. Because what we all want to do is make sure when we hand the keys over to somebody and they start their tenancy, that we're happy with the quality of the home that they've got. And that they're going to be able to turn that property into their home and live successfully. So I think that you can focus on relet time and have we got it to 20, but actually what is the quality of the home that we're giving somebody? We want to balance those two things out.
Thanks, Annalisa. Any more comments? In which case, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Danielle, please go ahead.
Sorry, I've got a few points. I was going to say, is it time to separate out roofs and floors if they're struggling to get contractors? Because that would probably solve a lot of the red problems, but it sounds like they've got on top of not having those operatives.
If I just jump in, yes, we have had roofs and floors are more specialist rather than the multi-skilled that come in. So they've got their complement of multi-skilled, and now we've got a new subcontractor base as well, Danielle. So it's that mix. Where we were left to is we had legacy work that came from that actually went back to with the MTS contract, because that ended literally the day before we went into lockdown, and then there was that sort of knock-on effect. We are now, having seen the KPIs for the current quarter we're in, I'm assured that it will be a much brighter and more colourful green picture, green and amber picture going into the next quarter. And that's because now we've got to that point. The noise is gone. We're focusing on what's coming in and delivering, and we've got the right complement of operatives and subcontractors to deliver that as well.
Good. Sorry.
Please go ahead, Daniel.
I was thinking where you talk about the seeking notice of seeking possessions and all this sort of getting houses back when they're not being paid for. Could it be helpful for us to see some sort of flow chart of the steps that you go through when someone starts to not pay the rent?
Annalisa?
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely fine. And please be assured that I think that we're only serving a very small number of notice seeking possessions. And I think we've had before, when we've had the rents team here, and we're happy to do that again, is that please be assured that the rents team see it as a failure if we go through the court process and evict somebody, because I think we've done one eviction so far this year, because their real focus is about getting people to be able to stay in their home, and really focusing on getting, if they're falling behind with their rent, if they've got rent arrears, if they've got financial difficulties, it's about supporting that person and having a realistic repayment program with them. I think historically some social landlords just went through the stage, right? If you were £500, then you got this letter, then you got that letter, then you got a notice, then we went to court, and then you were out. That's not our process at all. It's really tenant focused about making sure they stay in their home. And actually the cases where we do get to eviction is normally when somebody's abandoned the property and it's a way to get the property back in the legal way. So please be assured we work very closely with residents. We really appreciated the work the tenants panel did on letters, and we can, Terry, we can either arrange for the rents team to come back to the tenants panel, or we could, we'll be due to do a rent update at Landlord Services Advisory Board on the future work programme anyway.
Thanks, Annalisa. Danielle, that okay?
One more, sorry.
I thought there were three.
The complaints on page 20 and 21, I see that for level 2 complaints, you have got 15 working days and you managed to hit that target. But level 1 complaints, you only give yourself 10 working days, which is obviously trickier. And you've only got 6 complaints, but because these have been complex, apparently you've not hit them. Are you actually even, is this an attainable target? Is it realistic? Or is there something you need to do to meet the target, or is the target just not actually attainable?
I think it's what you call a challenging target. We want to meet it. I mean, fundamentally, if somebody's made a complaint, we want to get back to that person as soon as possible with a comprehensive answer. And really, it's not about, I always get frustrated and will always say to people, it may say we've got a 10-day target. It doesn't mean that you respond on the 10th day. Investigate, resolve it, get back to somebody. That could be 1, 2, 5, 7 days. Don't wait for 10. So this does come up quite often, and I think next year when you're looking at the KPIs again, there'll be an opportunity to feed into that. I would say I would like to keep it, because if you extend it to 12 or 15 days, then people will wait. Human nature would be that they would wait till the deadline. So I think the focus should be on resolving the issue as soon as possible, as long as everybody who's reviewing the KPIs is aware that sometimes we will go over for those more complex cases. But what I'd like to assure you is, when we do have cases where we know we're not going to be able to respond comprehensively in the timescale, we do keep in contact with the resident and let them know what's happening and let them know what we're waiting for and when we expect to be able to give them an answer.
For these 6 complaints, would it be possible if we could, I don't know, somehow find out about them, so we could dig down into what, if any of us have got any ideas, I'm sure you've gone through it all, of what could be improved?
Yeah, so the plan is, you remember we used to have the designated persons complaints panel, and now the democratic filter has gone for complaints and access to the ombudsman is much easier. So what we've done is we're changing the designated persons panel tenants group into a customer experience group, and that will be the opportunity. We will present more information around complaints there, give them some examples of our letters, give them more detail, be able to look if there's any themes or issues coming out. And the expectation is that then the tenants customer experience group will then report back into the Landlord Services Advisory Board with their findings and information.
Thanks, Annalisa. John?
Thanks, Chair. It's a follow-up question following on what Jackie asked about the voids and the turnaround. It's a difficult area, and I know we've spoken about it many times over the years, but I don't know what the current position is. When tenants come up towards leaving or whatever, and we're getting this sort of void, do we check the property? Do we try and recover costs afterwards? It's in a bad state? It's always worried me that these tenants and houses can get into this state when we actually take it over, as though we've got no knowledge of that prior to us taking it over again. What is the current position on doing this?
Okay, our current process is, when somebody gives us 4 weeks notice, we will go and visit. I have to say, over the last 2 years, that's been challenging with because we haven't been able to go into people's homes. We've had some challenges within the staffing of the teams, as you've been aware of. And that's another reason why we're doing this comprehensive relet review, because we want to make sure we're giving advice, we're getting homes back. As you say, I mean, it's a very small minority of people who don't look after their homes and return them in a poor state. Please don't think that we want to address stigma against social housing. It's a small minority of people across any sector or tenure. But what we do want to do is make sure that we are more aware of the condition of the home, and also fundamentally, we shouldn't be necessarily moving somebody if they haven't looked after the home they're in. They need to, if there's holes in the walls or they've taken doors down, we want to make sure that those are replaced, and if not, then we will recharge them for the works.
Jackie, yes, please.
Just a question, really. Sorry. Does this same apply when people want to do a swap? Because if somebody's doing a swap and, for instance, they've gone from they've swapped from a lovely house and they wanted to move for a particular reason, and the house they're going into is not in a good order. So that means that Waverley has to pick up the tab to put that house right. So do you actually look at the condition of the houses where people want to swap? I know it's probably difficult if they're going into another authority.
Yes, so mutual exchanges is really a tenant driven mechanism for them to move and for mobility. So it's not treated the same way. We don't get that property back as an empty home for us to check our standards. What we do, we have to do health and safety checks when people swap homes, but it's very clear through the mutual exchange process that you are taking the property as seen. Of course, we would do any emergency repairs and things, but it really is you're taking the property as seen, and you're choosing which property you want to move to. So it does become sometimes quite challenging, and the emphasis is really making sure that we can be clear about what work would or wouldn't be done if somebody moved to a property.
Great, thanks, Annalisa. Terry, you want a word?
Thanks, Chair. Far be it for me to actually challenge whether a target is the right number, but maybe I think I take your point really about voids. It's much better to move in 21 or 22 days after it became vacant, and it's right, rather than have a fleet of vans parked outside your property for 2 or 3 days. So I wonder whether we should be looking at that, and maybe we could break down the reasons that we are looking at, 28, 26 days. And why is that? Is it staffing? Is it material? Because I'm also aware that that's missing, or the condition of the property. So that would help all of us. On the performance from responsive repairs, we've also invited Chris Shipway, the manager for whoever they are, Ian Williams, and he's coming along to our tenants panel meeting later next month. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you all for that. So agenda item number 5, a bit of verbal from Andrew Smith.
A bit of verbal, Chairman. Well, actually, I think it was Councillor Rubini that stole my thunder on mould. So basically, I was just going to say what I said earlier about mould. When we next come to our next board meeting, which I think will be January, I don't think we've got one in December, have we, Annalisa? I would have passed my first 100 days as your executive head of service, so I'll be able to say how it's been. So you'll need to put that one in your diary. But other than that, no, I was just going to say something about mould. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. And Candice, HRA draft budget. And we want to get rid of drafts as soon as possible, so this will help, I'm sure.
Okay, hello. So Annalise is going to get a presentation up. Sorry, it's not in your pack. It was a bit of a late scramble to pull it together, but I'll share it after the meeting. So this is really early stages of the draft budget that I'm going to take you through. So it's just some key points really as a start of the discussions. So, okay. Thank you. There we go. You can't really see that very well, but a general introduction, the HRA and general fund are not separate legal entities, and the HRA is a ring-fenced account within the general fund, restricting the use of the income and management costs of the housing functions. And that's in compliance with Housing Acts. And HRA is primarily a landlord account containing the income and expenditure arising from those functions. As I said, we're currently in the early stages of setting the budget for 23-24, and the numbers that I've put into this presentation are very much estimates. I just want to stress that, and they will change as the budget setting process progresses.
Candice, just for anybody watching from outside, HRA is the housing revenue account.
Yes, housing revenue account. Yes, thank you. So next, just moving on to inflation. So our assumptions at the moment are forecasting at 11%. For 23-24, and that's based on HM Treasury forecasts. I will say a lot of our contracts apply inflation at a very early point in the year, which is why they're so high. Because although we expect to see a dip in inflation, it is expected to be higher at the start of the year. This is going to impact repairs and maintenance, IT, staffing, major repairs and grounds maintenance budgets. And the current estimates for the inflation impacts are 2.1 million for 23-24. So looking at our core capital budgets, which is one of our biggest spend areas in the HRA, the 22-23 opening budget was 7.7 million. With the draft proposal we're receiving at the moment for 23-24, we are looking at 9.8 million. And that's got increases in energy efficiency works, heating system upgrades, critical replacements and fire safety works. And we expect it to continue at this higher level, at least in the medium term, which is around 4 years. So moving on to the big topic area, and the one we really want to sort of discuss today is rent. So in the budget in 22-23, it's at 30.2 million. In September every year, the consumer price index, which is CPI, and that's the inflation rate that is used to set rents, is used to establish the limit on annual rent increases for social housing. And previously and up till now, that's CPI plus 1%. And if we were applying that this year, that would be an increase of up to 11.1%. So the government have just announced in the autumn statement a cap on the increase that we can go to at 7%. So this cap represents an estimated loss of income of 1.2 million in 23-24 when comparing to the original allowable amount of 11.1%. And over 30 years, that's an impact of 58 million. So just as a sort of reference point, a 1% increase would represent about 301,000 additional income for 23-24 to the HRA.
Could I quickly, I mean, this came before Resources ONS, and it was made very clear that one of the concerns was not to impose the sort of massive CPI plus 1% on tenants. So is this in any way suggesting that's what you were planning?
No, this is just a comparison against the norm and where we're at now. There's going to be a range of numbers in here. It's lots of different percentages, but no, that's not the suggestion, no. So I'm starting here looking at, and as I said, there's going to be a range of percentages here. I haven't done every percentage up to 7, just purely because of timings. They will come through when we get further into the rent setting process. So I've just got a few numbers in here as examples of the sorts of sensitivities around the rent increase numbers. So looking at 4%, which is probably the number you saw in the strategic review, which we brought through a month or so ago. So in terms of the numbers there, that would be an estimated additional income of 1.2 million in 23-24. Comparing this to the 7% cap that's just been brought in by government, this is a loss, and when I say a loss, compared to that number of 0.9 million and 43 million across the business plan. Moving up to 5%, so this would be 1.5 million next year. Again, that's a loss of 0.6 against the 7% and 29 million across the business plan. And lastly, onto that 7% cap that's been brought in by government, that would represent 2.1 million of additional income in 23-24. And against that 11.1%, as I stated previously, that's 1.2 million and 58 million across the 30-year business plan. I've put this into a summary there. It might be a little bit small for you to see, but as I said, I'll share this around after the meeting. And that's just showing a range of options, the impact that would have in year, and the comparison to the other numbers that we would normally have in a normal year, which is the 11.1%, and the cap that we currently have. So the option of what we have of what we can go to as a maximum of 7%. So there's some really big numbers in there, and this is showing your impact across the 30 years. And we always look at it in this view to make sure that we've got a sustainable business plan for the HRA going forward. And then again, the impact this would have on borrowing. So recently in the strategic review, we spoke about how with the current level of debt repayments that we had, there would be a need to reborrow with the works that we need to do on core and the energy efficiency works that we need to do. So each of these percentages that we've laid out here as sensitivities would have an impact on the amount that we would need to borrow. So if we brought in a 1% increase, borrowing would be at 44 million approximately across the business plan. And right down there to 7%, that would drop down to 10 million in terms of a borrowing requirement. So a big difference there in terms of those percentages and the amount that we would need to borrow. In terms of our current rent collection, as seen previously in the performance monitoring, it's all within target at the moment, which is really good news. The hardship funds had minimal use so far, although there are some plans of how that will be used going forward. And within the budget going forward, we are proposing to keep that £30,000 hardship fund in budget. I've put in here an average weekly rent, and to stress, this is not per property type or bedroom type. This is just an overall average when you total up all of those rents that we have. And down at the bottom there, we've got the impacts of those different rent increases, how much they would be weekly. So for a 1% increase, that would be an additional £1.22 a week, and that's £63.57 a year. And right up there to that 7% option, that would be an additional £8.56 per week and £444.99 annually. So just some other bits to talk about. There are other major changes expected to the expenditure budgets at this point. But as I said, we're still in the very early stages, so this may change. As proposed in the strategic review, which will be going to council in December, housing delivery will be, I'm sorry, I haven't typed, funding through right to buy receipts and borrowing. And we are not proposing to contribute from the HRA towards the scheme costs. Full details, including any variances, growth proposals and rent setting, will be brought forward in the new year. So there'll be further opportunities to review. And that's it, really. Questions?
Thanks, Candice. And I guess it's worth saying for anybody who's watching from outside that our rents go towards repairs, and repairs are more and more expensive for reasons that we all understand. So, questions, John?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm going slightly off this in a way. I would like to congratulate whoever was responsible for the new flats down at Way Hill, socially rented. Absolutely wonderful project, and we went and visited, and it really is a very good project. And I understand that they will be in perpetuity for Waverley tenants, providing we've got people who want to be nominated for that. So my question is, we've always had a relationship between social housing renting charges and the private sector renting charges. And when you look at affordable, for example, they're talking about 85% of the affordable rent in comparison to a private. Have we still got a relationship between the outside world and ourselves? Or is this just now a figure that we work towards because of the amount of money that we need to actually get in?
Yes, please, Candice.
Yeah. So there is a rent formula that's set for any social housing rents that we use as local authority, and any other providers that offer social rents would have to use. In terms of our affordable rent percentages, I'm not exactly sure what ours are, but I think we have a target lower than the standard. So I'll just maybe hand that over to Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Candice. Yes, so we've in our housing strategy, our new affordable housing delivery strategy that was adopted by council in April, we're putting forward a Waverley rent. Now, 80% of market value, including service charges, for a number of tenants coming into housing association properties was proving unaffordable, particularly if they were lower income working households. And so we determined through considerable background studies on viability and affordability that we would set Waverley rents. Now, being an old man of 61, I cannot remember the exact percentages on the 2 and 3 bed homes and the 4 bed homes, but I can make sure they're circulated. And if I had a copy of the housing strategy in front of me, I could remember them. But it's lower than 80%, but slightly higher than 65% of market rent for 3 and 4 bed homes. And I think 70% of market rent for 1 and 2 bed homes. So my glamorous assistants have assisted me. So that's good. So that means that although they're higher than social rents, it means they are affordable through the extensive work we have done to those lower income working households that we really do want to provide homes for. that are affordable and for them to live in long term. What housing associations do, I was at a conference yesterday and I heard one housing association officer breathe a sigh of relief over the government's cap being 7% rather than, as they'd feared, 3%. So I guess some housing associations will increase their rents up to the government cap, and we'll have to see how that plays out. We do meet with our housing association partners regularly in our fora that we hold 2 or 3 times a year, and we are usually discussing the issue of rents. Some of the housing associations do have a social rent programme that their boards have asked them to deliver a certain number of homes in their annual programme for social rent. Southern Housing Group is one of those, and we've seen some homes delivered this year at social rent, which is good. But housing associations will do what they do. We want to make sure that our rents are affordable to our residents.
Yeah, thank you very much for the comprehensive answer. Thank you, Andrew.
Stephen.
Thank you. I want to clarify something. When you say 80% of market rent, including service charges, do you mean you take the market rent for a property and then add the service charges that the private landlord would add to get a total, and then you take 80% of that?
No, we'll take the market rent, the 80% of that might be, say, £150, but that £150 will have to include the service charges. So the maximum the tenant will pay is 80% of the market rent, and that will have to have service charges factored in.
And roughly, how do service charges generally relate to rents for Waverley?
I'll hand over to Annalisa to that. I'm not sure exactly.
Well, it's quite a difficult one. So if there's a development that's a block of flats or something, then the service charges will be for communal cleaning, grounds maintenance and things, and that will be set with the landlord. So when we're talking about housing associations, that's beyond it. But what we're saying is, if we're developing our own homes, we want to ensure that the rent and the service charge is no more than 80% of the market rate. Because what's happened with a lot of social housing, and particularly when I was working in London, is that the rents were affordable, and then somebody moved in and found out that actually they'd got a concierge service and the cleaning, and they couldn't afford to live there. So we want to make sure that we've got all those costs up front to make sure that homes are affordable and sustainable for people.
Right. So can you clarify on average, what percentage do we as a landlord charge by way of service charge relative to the rents that we charge?
I think, Councillor Mullen, that will depend. So if it is a block of flats, then there will be service charges to do with the communal areas. There'll be green space. So it'll be different scheme by scheme.
If you like, we could get some examples.
It'd be good to know. I mean, is it 1%, 10%, 20%? It makes a big difference.
I think that there's a big difference between, a block of 4 properties in a flat block will have a minimal service charge compared to a senior living scheme where the service charge includes the care line, the heating, the cleaning, the laundry and all those things. So we need to just give you some examples.
That's actually the other question I had. So when we quote our rent top line of 30.2 million, is that pure rent and not rent plus service charges?
Yes, that's pure rent.
So what do we do about service charges? Is there any way that we can help Stephen with
It'd be good to know what they do. It'd be good to know what they total, and certainly hearing about senior living, if they include heating and lighting, I mean that in a sense should be stripped out. I mean, to me, service charges are things that you pay to the landlord for the communal areas, and so I found it difficult to understand whether this reference to including service charges made a big difference to the calculation. And Andrew's explained that that's referring to our service charges. It may be that, I mean, if you can call it a standard council house sitting in Hazelmere, are there any service charges?
Okay, thanks. Thank you all for that. So moving on to Oh, sorry, Danielle?
Yeah, obviously that potential rent increase is quite worrying. It's quite a big number, the 7%. That goes without saying, I guess. But also, I just am fearful about additional borrowing, especially when, I mean, I don't want tenants to have less money spent on services, but if we have additional borrowing and then with the interest rates, it's going to lead to more debt repayment and less money to spend on services. So I'm just fearful about borrowing more when perhaps at this time we should be trying to repay as much as possible.
Candice, if you can cut through
Yeah,
that.
no problem. Yeah, it's always a concern when it gets to the need to reborrow. Unfortunately, throughout the strategic review, it became clear that it was coming down to that limited option. With the way that our debt repayments are scheduled, we go up to 17 million in 1 year. And then so it's a balancing act with the HRA. What are our priorities? Our priorities are keeping safe homes, warm homes, and up to the correct standard. And when you then weigh in those and core capital and repairs and maintenance, what you get left with is a need to reborrow. Now, which is why this rent comes into that balancing act and where we go. And there's no suggestion at where we're going to go at the moment. It's certainly not suggesting that we're going to go at the 7%, the 1%, because it is an unknown. And that's why we start to weigh up those balances with the impact it would have. And any option as it stands would result in a need to borrow, because that is where we've got to with the HRA through previous reductions in rents and impacts and various economic impacts, which have led to where we are at the point of needing to borrow. So it's always a concern. We never want to borrow, and we'll always look at the ways to avoid borrowing. But that's just currently where we are and where we found ourselves through the strategic review.
Thanks, Candice. Okay, Danielle, all right? Right, okay. Thank you all for that. So moving on to agenda item number 7, we have housing. Sorry? What have I lost?
Nothing, but please may I just round up that item? Thank you. I just want to say we asked Candice to come and talk to you all today to give you a bit of time and thinking space to think about the rent increase and the situation we're in, because the draft budget will come back to this group in January. And so we just really wanted to give the opportunity to share those figures with you so you can start pondering, you know, yes, in an ideal world, we wouldn't put anybody's rent up, but if we do that, then we're not going to be able to afford some essential services. So we really wanted to kind of bring those figures to you. We'll circulate them to the group so that then in January, you're more informed to be able to have that discussion and have a debate about where you as a board would like to advise the portfolio holder of what would be a reasonable rent increase. Thank you.
Thanks, Annalisa. My apologies for not letting you get to the pudding. Oh, Dennis, go ahead.
Can. Right. When you've got to go to the government with what you want to borrow for this year, next year. Now, if they say, I'm sorry, you can't have that money, throws most of those figures out.
Yeah, so yeah, the need for reborrowing actually isn't for another few years, but borrowing from the PWLB, the government, is not the only option that we have. Also, it would be unlikely that they would refuse, but there are options of internal borrowing from other local authorities. So there would be a range of options that would be reviewed. But you're right, if we couldn't borrow, a lot of numbers would be thrown out. We would have to come back to the drawing board and look at what we do again. I would say it's unlikely, but we would be looking at a range of borrowing options, not just the PWLB.
Surely other councils will be the same. Yeah, surely other councils will be in the same position as you. So how are you going to borrow from them if they can't borrow from the government?
Absolutely. So again, yeah, there is a lot of inter-authority borrowing that goes on, that continues to go on. And that's all to do with the cash balances that council has. Some will generate a lot of cash throughout the year, which will give them cash to use. So the sort of comparison towards cash balances and budget aren't always, it's not a simple thing. And perhaps we can explore further in another session the complexities of sort of cash flow that we hold versus budget. But as it stands currently, there are a lot of options for internal borrowing. Inter-authority borrowing is something that is going on constantly. So absolutely, there are a lot of councils in similar hardship. But if
you've got cash over, they're not going to lend you what you're asking for, are they? Because they're going to say, hang on a minute, you've got that in your kitty. We're only going to lend you so much.
Yeah. So as I say, cash balances are very much different to our budget, which is why if we did have cash that wasn't a reserve that was spoken for, we could look at internal borrowing as a first option. So that would be a first option, is internal borrowing and how we look at that. But it might well be that cash is spoken for something else. So we do, and cash is running constantly throughout this organisation. So we might have cash for a 6-month period. It's quite a complex thing.
Thanks, Candice.
Could I comment, Chairman?
I got Robert first, but if I can. But before you kick in, Robert, I understand that Candice has another plan, and there's a bucket on the way out for any spare change you've got.
Will next year's budget make any difference to new build projects?
No. So through the strategic review, the new strategy for new build projects is to fund through right to buy receipts and borrowing, so it won't have an impact.
Can I put your mind at rest? It's an area that I know something about. There is very little likelihood that the government would ever prevent a local authority from borrowing to basically spread out its capital repayments over a larger number of years. When this mortgage was first taken out in 2015, and before 5 years of rents reduction by 1% happened, it was actually expected that we'd be able to repay all the debt out of ordinary flow from the HRA. What was referred to caused this downward course in our rents, which is now recovering. But that's why there's going to be a need to find another source of funds to pay these quite large amounts over the next 5 to 7 years. I think that's when it really hits. But it's a standard way in which local authorities get around that problem. And there's less of a snowflake's chance in hell the government actually stopping a local authority from solving the problem in that way. It's an absolute standard use of borrowed funds, of the PWLB funds, but as Candice says, there are other sources as well. And the point about inter-authority borrowing, the cash balances held by authorities all over the country vary enormously. Some have had, for some reasons, to do with how they have invested money in the past. If they have large successful commercial property investments, they will often throw off an awful lot of cash from that. That cash can be lent to other local authorities who are not so well endowed. Waverley is sort of a little below the middle. We have quite a bit of cash, but we're not as well off as others. But I think you can be completely confident that this plan would never be stymied by the government stopping it.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Now, Annalisa, if you would like to sum up on this point. No, hey, okay. So we can move on to our next, or very much near our last agenda item. One more after this, of course. Housing asset management strategy, starring Heather Rigg.
Thank you, Chair. Annalise is kindly going to move the slides forward for me. So just doing an update really on the housing asset management strategy. This strategy was published in April 22, and I think my predecessor, Peter David, brought it to the board at that point. And it was agreed that we would come back in 6 months to give regular updates to the board on how progression has been happening. And the housing asset management strategy is it's a framework really and action plan for the property services team and housing operations to detail the actions and how we're going to deliver the investment of the HRA business plan and our strategic priorities. So the agenda that we're going to go through and look at today is just the core themes of the asset management strategy, the lessons that we learned, the influencing factors that we have within the strategy, and then just the commitments that are within and the progression that the team have made to date. So Annalise, if we could skip on, I think I've kind of covered those two off already, thank you. So just a reminder of the core themes. There are 4 core themes, excuse me. Understanding our service, our homes, the tenants and the stakeholder, what your drivers and requirements are, to provide modern homes across the borough, proactively decarbonise the homes, and ensure our homes are safe, secure for our tenants and leaseholders. And that slide just gives you a little bit of a breakdown of the housing stock that we have here in Waverley, just a few numbers in terms of the different housing archetypes that we have. I'll just moving along. So there were a number of lessons learned from the previous asset management strategy that we have, and they were linked to key themes. Those being, as detailed in the presentation, communications. Previously, the asset management strategy, I think it was fair to say that it was a document that got dusty. But now we utilise it. It's part of the team's sort of strategic service plan. It's part of the team's objectives and goals, and everything has a golden thread linking back for it. There are operational leads assigned to the actions, and the document is alive, and officers know it. We've gone through it. We've consulted on it. We review it regularly. Data planning. We are really aware that the data is the core, the bedrock of anything that we do within our assets. So we have gone through and are going through a period of data cleansing, removing duplicated data, reconciling and ratifying the data across the housing systems to ensure that there is integrity and credibility. And then we are starting on moving forward with a stock condition survey project, and looking at our systems, is improving the resilience and understanding of the asset management systems. And accountability. Annalisa kindly holds us to account, quarterly reviews to ensure that we are delivering, things are moving forward and they're not stagnating. We link it into the corporate deliveries, such as the Climate Change Action Plan, and the actions are regularly reviewed for relevance, because I think we all know that at the minute the only thing that is constant, I think, is change, and we've seen that over the last number of years. And finally, sort of the key theme running through this is our influencing factors, and what we have that have caused, brought us to where we are, and influenced how we developed the asset management strategy. So if we nip to the next one, yeah. So within these influencing factors, there are a number of key areas. Top one being that of the residents' voice, and we have utilised information from the STAR survey that we carried out over the summer last year. We have now started back with our tenant satisfaction surveys. That started with an organisation called TLF, the Leadership Factor, the Leadership Factory, apparently, which started in April, measuring satisfaction and response repairs. And going forward, there will be the tenant satisfaction measures that the regulator for social housing will be introducing in April 23, but internally we hope to start to pilot them in January. Our corporate priorities, the asset management strategy needs to ensure that we are meeting local housing needs, that we are linked into the provision of affordable homes, that we're getting the right mix of homes, that they're in the right geographic spread, maximising our properties in terms of size and need, and then the identification of land for future development. So it's that active asset management. Onto the next slide, please. Another key area is the the emerging national picture, it has to be said that it has been busy in housing, in the housing sector and social housing in general over the last number of years, and I think there's more to come. But we've had a lot of regulatory reform with new building safety legislation, fire safety. We've got the impact of the cost of living crisis and increasing energy costs. And then there's the widening of the regulator for social housing. Even in the last week since I've written this, written this presentation, there are the prevalence of damp and mold that's bringing us back to the review of decent homes and what is a decent home, what is a modern home. Those are all going to be discussions that will be coming up that we need to take on board as we move through how we deliver and manage our housing stock. And then finally, we had the review of the housing revenue business plan, which there was a review that Candice brought to us last month, and that's giving us priorities to consider the spend profile, our funding, resourcing and procurement. And last but far from least, we need to decarbonise our homes. We've got our target set for 2030 in terms of carbon neutrality, bringing our homes to EPC-C, pardon me, and that now is embedded in everything we do. It's, how does this reduce carbon? What is the impact? For example, with the void and reletting review, we also need to link in and weigh up, do we have a longer void relet time, but make the use of the opportunity when the home is void to do more installation work and stuff that may take longer term in terms of works, but it needs to be weighed up against then obviously the rent loss time. And these are all key questions that the teams will be discussing over the incoming months. So that moving on to the themes within the asset management plan itself, they're broken into 4 areas, and that is the data, asset data, planning of the data, and the service delivery. So we need to understand our properties, we need to understand the data about it so that we can strive to constantly improve and innovate. The second area is that of modern homes. So that's providing homes which are warm, secure, high standard and affordable. The energy efficiency and decarbonisation. So that's to improve the energy efficiency of our homes whilst supporting those who are in field property, and that's really important. And finally then, building safety and compliance to ensure that we meet our landlord obligations, that our homes are safe, secure, and meeting regulatory compliance. Within each of the key areas, there are commitments. As you can see, that there are 4 commitments within the asset planning and service delivery. So there's implementation of a data health check, to develop a 5-year works program and procurement plan, a staffing capacity review, and to create a management framework a contract management framework. And just to give you some oversight of the progression that we've got to date, we think everyone's aware that there's a stock condition survey project which is progressing. We're on the cusp of publishing. It's due to publish, I believe, the 6th of December, if that's a Tuesday, and that will then be live over the month of December into early January, just because of the Christmas period. And we would hope then that we would be doing the technical marking and due diligence in January with a view, mid-January with a view to award, or at least have a preferred contractor by the end of January. We have delivered a procurement roadmap. We've got that nailed down. It's a lot easier to do it in the sort of the short-term years. As we move out into the medium and long term, that becomes a bit more vague, but we do have a roadmap that is agile, because things come in that we need to include within that. There's now consistent contract management framework in place. There are templated reports, there's consistency in the KPIs that are reported across the contracts, and we have regular financial and performance reporting reviews. And then in terms of contract management training too, we have one officer undertaking a contract management training course provided by the Government Commercial College, and that's funded by the Department of Levelling Up in Communities. Moving on to the next area within the asset plan is our modern homes. And within that, there are 6 commitments. So it's to develop modern homes standard, to create a clear management and resolution framework linked to damp, mold and condensation, which is stemmed from disrepair claims and the Housing Ombudsman report. To review our key component replacements that are overdue within the Decent Home Standard so that we can be 100% compliant. To have an annual strategic appraisal assessment, to create a longer term garage strategy, and to review our current engagement opportunities with our residents. And again, to give some update of where the team have progressed. So there was a damp and mold leaflet that was shared with tenants and leaseholders as part of the last edition of the Homes and People. We've got a project that has really gathered strength, but we started working on that in the review of the damp and mold process in May. That has now sort of becomes a lot larger. We're reviewing data, and we would hope that we will be bringing the draft process and onward plan to the board in February to discuss that with you. The Decent Home status has been reviewed, and we at the minute are currently at 11% of homes not meeting decency. I would go on a limb and say I think that 11% isn't correct, and actually our status is better, but it's down to data integrity and systems not being reconciled, and that's something we're working on at the moment. We've got a forward plan developed for the next 2 years, and that's progressing. So, and the garage strategy is on hold because garages are being transferred to general fund, and then we will engage with general fund about how we move forward with that. And then we've got new engagement opportunities that are being exploited. As I mentioned, we've got tenant satisfaction surveys that have recommenced. We have member resident engagement and key projects such as stock condition survey. We would have done it with the response repairs, and there will be increased reporting of measurements such as the new tenant satisfaction measures that we need to report annually to the regulator. Energy efficiency and decarbonisation. There are 6 commitments, and these link to our. Sorry, 1 second. Apologies, I whoever was going. The energy efficiency and decarbonisation, we've got 6 commitments at the moment within the asset management strategy, and that is to develop a clear terminology for the energy related terms, to develop a property service energy strategy, to develop baseline carbon outputs generated through our contractors and supply chain, to start work on the gas boiler strategy, submit a funding bid for the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 2 that closed Friday last week, and assess the impact of energy efficiency measures and the impact that has on our tenants. So just to give a bit of progress of where we have moved on that, a glossary of key terminology and meanings has been developed, and we will be including that in the spring edition of Homes and People, but we first need to seek consultation with the tenants panel to make sure that it's understandable and that residents, how we're explaining it, the understanding is there. A working group has been set up to develop the energy strategy. It's in its infancy, but we have now targeted the worst performing properties within the stock, and we are starting to develop a cyclical ongoing program of updating EPCs to understand where we are in terms of our of meeting all our homes at EPCC. Key contractors provide a baseline of data on carbon emissions quarterly. The gas boiler strategy is in draft, and it's expected to be out for consultation later in Q4 of 22-23. We have submitted a consortium bid on the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, Wave 2, that was submitted in conjunction with Surrey County Council. and that was submitted last Friday. So I know the bid was successfully submitted. We haven't heard any update yet. And then we just to say we do have ongoing programs of work. We take that fabric first approach, looking at cavity wall and loft top-ups for our homes. With the loft insulation, we're currently looking at our homes that are under 100 mil, and this will be then rolled out further to lofts where we have under 150 mil. The one thing I would say there is the team are finding it difficult to get residents to engage, and there have been pushback. So I think it's something that we will want to work with the tenants panel to see how we can be more proactive in getting people to understand the benefits that this will bring to them.
Sorry, could I intervene there? I mean,
yep.
I've had a question for some time. Robert mentioned the impact of poor cavity wall insulation. Have we done any investigation yet as to whether that's a major problem? I was a bit worried when researching it for my own private purposes that there are a great many cavity wall installers, and a lot of their work is actually taking poor cavity wall insulation out of walls. And I mean, do we have an issue that we've put cavity wall insulation into a proportion of our homes already, but is it now very, very old? Is it failing, or was it badly put in the first place? And the second one, I don't want to overburden this, but the thing I have been made very aware of is that the COP, the coefficient of performance of heat pumps, which is everyone's favored means of replacing gas boilers, it can fall a lot in winter when the outside temperature falls. And this can lead to extremely large electricity demand. And that in turn, I think there's a risk that we will put tenants into fuel poverty who aren't there at the moment. I'd just like to be sure that this council is fully aware of that risk. I've had heat pump engineers round to my house. I've listened to the spiel a number of times, and they go on about COP and SCOP, but they get quite defensive is not quite the word, but they simply don't know. No one has the data of what happens to electricity demand in winter. And I think it's something we have to take very seriously, as we could end up putting tenants into considerable expense if they're reliant on electricity and they have to use so much more of it to get the temperature in their house up to a reasonable level. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. I mean, this is really why our fabric first approach is our focus now. Heather?
I couldn't have put it better. I totally agree with you, Councillor Milliner. I think the solution of air source heat pumps has its place, but it's not for every property. And I think we just cannot think that that's going to be the solution on its own. There are a number of solutions. Air source heat pumps, I believe, need to be considered with complementary measures as well, such as PV panels to offset. And at the minute that we're in that discovery stage, and that's where the energy strategy and the gas strategy will be linked together. In terms of your point about cavity wall, we're getting out to the age that the cavity walls that are in our properties is of an age that it does need to be replaced, and that's why the new programs will be rolled out. There was changes to regulations in terms of how we can install cavity walls, which makes procurement slightly more difficult, but that's not to say it's impossible, and it's just a matter of rolling your sleeves up and getting on with it. And that's where the team are focused on, because those are areas where we can make immediate impact going forward, and those where our capital spend on energy efficiency will be focused in the first instance.
Thank you very much for that. That's reassuring. Could I add one further point, Chairman? Again, through personal experience, one of the drawbacks about solar panels, they work brilliantly, but 3/4 of what they generate in a year occurs between April and September. They only deliver a quarter between October and March. And that makes it impossible to be, if you like, off-grid in the winter months if you're using any form of heat pump, because you do have to depend upon the grid to supply most of the electricity you need to make the heat pump work. So again, I'd be grateful if that could be kept very much in mind when these solutions are being investigated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just moving on to the final of the 4 themes within the asset management strategy: compliance and building safety. without a doubt, you know, an area that we must adhere to. So the 4 commitments here is to review the management and reporting processes and understand the need for compliance reporting systems, assess the roles and responsibilities of officers and contractors to define their roles, their qualifications and accreditations, develop a 5-year servicing programme, and create a suite of communication templates and literature. And the progression. So there's, as I mentioned, there's a regular monthly reporting set up to key officers, key senior officers with standardized reporting templates. Compliance data is reported bi-monthly to the Health and Safety Committee. And also going forward, there will be compliance data that will form part of the resident satisfaction measures to the regulator for social housing. The review of the roles and responsibilities and qualifications will form part of the overall housing strategy review. Servicing programme has been incorporated into the procurement roadmap. New works have been identified. That includes fire door inspections, remedial fireworks, and carbon monoxide monitor installations. These are all programmes that are live and ongoing. There's a systems review of our current Keystone systems has commenced, and we're at the current supplier engagement stage. We have introduced, and we're just mobilising at present, a new gas auditing system that has been procured. So it is live in test. It'll be live in January. And the communications review and literature will be part of this wider communications review that is ongoing. Draft definitions will be produced, and we will consult with key partners about how best, what are the best communication channels to utilise. So just in conclusion, then, for me, the housing asset management strategy is a live document. It's a document I carry about with me because that's our, as I called it, the bedrock. That's what we need to be. Everything has to link to it and to achieve. It's under constant review because we're in evolving times, and we need to ensure that it is appropriate, what we're doing, and links to what is needed. And I think it's fair to say that we had a challenging start back when this was published with various changes within the team, but it was great to actually step back and take a look at what we have achieved and what we are doing, and things are moving, and actions are progressing. So just finally then, just any questions?
Thanks very much, Heather. Just for your own information, in Heather's spare time, she also works on the moon programme landing with NASA. So we're very lucky to have her. Any questions? Any comments, officers? Well, thank you all. Thank you for that terrific presentation, Heather. I'm glad it's in your hands.
I have to say, Councillor Rivers, it will be going over to the next best safe pair of hands of Mr. Wagstaff come January.
Good. Okay. Thank you for that. So moving on then on to our agenda item number 8, our work programme. Annalisa.
Yes, so you've got a copy of what you've looked at in the last year, and just to let you know that we've got a meeting on the 15th of December, which I need to make sure you've all been invited to. I think I did that this week. Yes, hopefully, yes. And at that meeting, because we're not having a formal board meeting, we'll look at the agenda for next year, and we'll review what we've achieved over the year, review the reports, our outcomes, and think about how we communicate the outcomes of this board to the wider tenants and members. And so the forward plan for the next meeting proper in January, we'll have information on the gas contract, we'll have information from the senior living team, and we'll also have the budget coming through. So 3 quite big items. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Annalisa. Now, last item is any other business, which I don't like because it means that we don't know what it is in advance, so it's very hard for officers to prepare. But if you do have any burning issues, I don't like the word burning, any important issues, I'm sure that officers will be around to help you out on that. But if you have anything that you want to raise, put it through Annalisa for inclusion in subsequent meetings or offline solutions. So date of next meeting is a long time away, actually. Date of our next meeting is January, right? So put the month in your diary. 24th, 20. I'm sorry about that. Let's go for the 26th. Seems a good day. This time, yeah, 26th. This time next January. And thank you all for spending your time with us this morning. I appreciate it very much, and safe journey home.
I'd just like to say a bit of praise for Waverley Council. I live in Shepherd's Court. We have a lovely communal garden with flower beds. And I wrote to the council saying, you're wasting so much water. Why don't you put water butts in? Because the water coming from the gutters goes straight down the pipe and disappears. And then we could use the water from the water butts. They then in turn wrote to the manager, Julie Jones, and between us three, we've got 4 water butts. So I can't say any more, and it only took 2 months.
Well, thank you.
And
for
they
that,
are coming to fit them next week.
Thanks for that, Dennis. And can you make some other suggestions? And we'll.
No, I mean water butts is